The tension-adjustable hoof buffers are designed to finish and maintain the protective arc of the Mustang roll by refining its shape and taper from its widest point at the toe to its narrowest width at the heels. The buffers do this by flexing slightly as you apply them to avoid making flat surfaces, producing a uniform taper and smooth finish, using an arcing stroke across the wall. The hoof buffers have the same handle and are used in the same manner, but they differ in that the HB1 has a sanding belt where the HB2 has a perforated metal blade. The sanding belt of the HB1 removes horn more gradually and leaves a smoother surface. The metal blade of the HB2 is more aggressive, removing horn more rapidly with its cheese grater-like action. Thus, the two buffers are best used in sequence, HB2 first, then HB1 for a final finish. For regular weekly touch-ups, the HB1 sanding belt action is usually sufficient, but on thicker, harder hooves, the HB2's metal blade is best for such maintenance. Both buffers work best when the tension of belt or blade is adjusted so that there is slight flexion under firm finger pressure. A tighter belt or blade is more aggressive, but don't over-tighten your belt. For full trims, the buffers are designed to be used in sequence after the radius rasps have shaped the basic arc of the Mustang roll. This 1-2-3 sequence produces the fastest and best results. On thinner and softer hoof wall, the HB1 sander is sufficient, but the HB2 metal blade is excellent for shaping the upper border of the Mustang roll and thicker, harder hooves. Both buffers are used in the same ways, holding the hoof in one hand, with the hoof between your legs and steadied with one hand, or against one of your legs, on the grip head of a hoof stand, or with the solid support of a hoof cradle. Buffers can also be used in a two-hand grip to increase the speed of horn removal. Apply force in a forward thrust. More strokes with lighter pressure works better than bearing down hard on the blade or belt. The buffers remove horn in every direction, pushing or pulling. Varying your stroke helps create the most uniform arc and smoothest surface. The vertical stroke is used with belt or blade flat against the outer hoof wall. This action removes flares as it extends the upper border of the Mustang roll. Most of your strokes will involve an arcing movement to blend the curvature across the wall thickness, removing flat strips or sharp edges. A slanting or diagonal stroke that angles across and around the edge of the wall helps to blend the inner and outer aspects of the roll. The outer wall can be smoothed with a horizontal stroke around the circumference of the hoof. This helps extend and shape the upper border of the Mustang roll, and smooths the edges of the heels and quarters. Working the wall from above, stroke the blade or belt flat across the wall to remove irregularities and smooth the upper border of the roll. You'll often get better leverage and access to the wall by changing your grip from one hand to the other and reaching across the hoof. Often you cannot see all of the arc as you work, so it's important to use your fingers to test for bumps and sharp edges as you smooth the wall surface. Make long, full strokes using the entire length of the belt or blade so that you don't wear out the middle before the ends. You can also use the hard back of the HB1 for more aggressive sanding. This action is useful on flares, rough patches, and thin quarter walls. The main stress on the sanding belt occurs where it meets the end of the handle. Loosen and rotate belts often to prevent them from tearing here. Use a wire brush to clean the sanding belt so it remains effective. The solid support of a hoof stand makes using the buffer easier and gives you more open access to the hoof wall. This allows you to do much of the wall rounding from above, working down and around the edges of the hoof, and to use both hands to apply more steady pressure. It's also helpful when sanding lumps and flares and even working the bearing surface of the wall. Similarly, the secure support of a hoof cradle makes using the buffer more effective. But it's important to use a cradle that gives you full access to the outer hoof wall so that you can get your buffers in all the best positions. Again, remember that the hoof buffers perform best when used after the radius rasps have been applied to remove sharp edges and create the basic arc of the Mustang roll. Both hoof buffers have a red arrow indicating the direction to rotate the turnbuckle to tighten blade or belt. Rotating the turnbuckle in the direction of the red arrow increases tension. Rotating the turnbuckle in the opposite direction of the red arrow decreases tension to loosen the blade or the belt. The sanding belt on the HB1 wears most where it meets the end of the handle. To get the most use from a belt, you must rotate it around the handle occasionally. Rotating the belt moves the wear point and allows you to use the entire length of the belt. To rotate the belt, you must first loosen the tension by turning the turnbuckle in the opposite direction of the red arrow. Hold the handle firmly with one hand as you use the wrench. When the belt becomes loose enough to remove, take it off the handle and rotate it around so that a new portion of the belt is positioned between the ends of the handle. Be careful to get the belt centered on the handle. Check to be sure that the area which was over the ends of the handle is now moved away from those pressure points. With the belt repositioned, tighten the belt again by turning the turnbuckle in the direction of the red arrow. The tighter the belt, the more aggressively it will sand. A looser belt will wrap around the curve of the Mustang roll more easily, but not sand as aggressively. Best tension gives a high note when tapped with the wrench and flexes slightly under firm pressure. Be careful not to over-tighten the belt, for this can cause it to break. To replace a belt, loosen the tension on the handle by turning the buckle in the opposite direction of the red arrow until you can remove the belt. When installing a new belt, you might have to give the turnbuckle a few more turns to fit the new belt. Old belts will stretch. Slide the belt on evenly over both sides and ends of the handle. Position the new belt in the middle of the handle. Then, tighten it by turning the turnbuckle in the direction of the red arrow. Test belt tension by tapping with the wrench and pushing with your fingers. It should give slightly under firm pressure. After use, belts often need retightening. Hoof buffer 2 blades are easily replaced with screwdriver and wrench. Hold the handle firmly. Loosen the turnbuckle by rotating it in the opposite direction of the red arrow. Remove the blade locating screws. Slide the old blade off the handle. Mount a new one on it. Replace the screws. Then tighten the turnbuckle until the blade flexes slightly under strong pressure. Here is the full sequence of replacing a hoof buffer 2 blade using the wrench that comes with the tool. Use your thumb to hold the blade tab in place on the handle as you unscrew the blade locating screws. Be sure you align the holes in the blade and the handle before you insert the screw. With a new blade mounted, tighten it by rotating the turnbuckle in the direction of the red arrow. Then test the tension by pressing on it with your finger. It should yield just slightly under firm pressure. With use, hoof buffer 2 blades will gradually lose their effectiveness like all rasps. But don't give up too soon. And be careful not to push too hard on any one part of the blade. Push it forward rather than pushing downward on it.